Okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Okay. So the dreaded or the blessed technology. We're getting into technology now. Who's ready for technology? Okay. When I say that word, I'm both excited and stressed at the same time. How many are you with me? Yeah. Yeah. I did not use the two letters. You know what I'm about to say. I didn't say AI. I said technology. Okay. All right. But I love, okay, the first word, it should be like multiply execution, right? Because I feel like I'm getting executed. No. Execution multiplier, which means it'll be very positive discussion. Promise, you're back. Like double the trouble, Kelly. All right. Your first time, right? Right? First time. Haze them, gentlemen.
Yep.
You behave yourself. I'm warning you now twice. Okay. It's like we bookended this. All right. All right. So this is going to be fun. How many of you remember like last year we did that? Like, what did we call it, Greg? What was it last year? It was like a real deal, right? This
Something
is
hot,
like,
some hot seat
it was
kind of
like
thing.
hot seat,
Yeah.
no holds barred. Once
Yeah.
again, this is like the last night, okay? I can use I'm on being videoed. I can't use the word BS. I can say BS.
I think that
Okay.
was me. You
We
don't have
used
to
the
take
word
credit for that.
BS 4 times when we were talking about technology, but in a positive way, right? Because we were like, let's cut the BS, let's talk technology. Gentlemen, ladies, let's talk technology and let's cut the BS. All right, let's go.
Got it.
All right. You're up, Aaron Casey. Take us.
You get to them. Yeah. All right, guys. Well, thank you guys for joining today. Obviously, Casey and I are going to lead through this, but before we jump in, let's get some introductions on stage and kind of set the tone for who's with us and how we're going to answer questions based on your expertise today.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. So Nick Meyer here. I am coming up on 11 years with NetSuite, and prior to that, I spent about 5 years at SAP. So my formal education and background is accounting and finance. I worked in accounting for a few years before I was approached by an ERP vendor to work on the consulting side. And so I've been a part of the sales process and the implementation process for thousands of customers across SAP and NetSuite in a variety of industries. Right now, I am running a pre-sales team. So the folks that are doing the consulting with our clients on understanding their business challenges and shaping that into something that they can implement. So that's a little bit about me.
So my name's Jason Floyd. I'm what am I not? I'm a delivery lead for the PS side, so professional services. After the sale, you kind of talk to me. My background, I've been here for about 10 years with NetSuite, and we 10 years in September. Before that, I worked for Epicor, so another competitor, right? We did that for about 10 years. Functional consultant, always been in the warehouses, can talk to customers about that whole process. And just looking forward to some of these questions.
I'm Joe Friedman. I am the Senior Director of AI Adoption at NetSuite. I'm a CPA and an accountant. I've been at NetSuite over 14 years. Started my career in sales engineering, helped design our advanced revenue module prior to ASC 606 in the early 2000 teens. Was chief of staff for our founder, Evan Goldberg, for a couple of years. And now I really bring a business user focus to AI. And I talk to customers and private equity companies and partners and prospects about really how our customers are using AI, how they're adopting it, what our strategy is. And I'm excited to talk to y'all today.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kelly Gagne. I'm a director at Caravel, which is an alliance partner of NetSuite, which basically means we're an implementation services firm for them. My background comes by the way of public accounting, started my career off there, and then slowly moved over into the technology side, worked directly at NetSuite as a solution engineer, and then was also at Sage Intacct for a while as a solution engineer. So very similar background to Nick in the sense that I've worked with over 1,000 customers through their evaluation of NetSuite and now specifically on the implementation side.
Thanks, Kelly. In case you want to.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Casey Janik. I spent about 13 years in public accounting, tax, compliance, and consulting, and then moved over to a client of mine in controllership, which led to a lot more than just financial reporting. That led me to a private equity company, which I oversaw 4 to 7 portfolio companies. And then I created a CFO leadership advisory firm, and had an opportunity to meet Aaron and partner and present here. So we're excited to get going here. Aaron, would you like to give a background on yourself?
Yeah. So my background in finance, I was a CFO of a nonprofit organization called Human IT for about 13 years. Built that from the ground up, bootstrapped it to about $50 million in revenue annually, and pivoted recently and founded a technology company called MoveWise. So we are a AI agentic app that focus on workflows and orchestration for the residential real estate market. And we're creating that platform and marketplace for everybody to do their best work regardless of persona, right? So if you're a real estate agent, if you're an inspector in the process, if you're the buyer or the seller, anybody along the way can do their work and find customers within the platform to increase efficiency, velocity, and number of deals getting done in the space. So thank you for handing that off to me. I'll set the premise and the tone for the conversation today. We're gonna obviously do this panel type of round, and we're going to ask a bunch of questions to our folks on stage. We're going to talk about a couple different themes: adoption, integration, and realization, and really kind of talking about a specific question to set the tone, right? It's not about should we invest in technology. That's decision has already been decided many times over. It's about why so many of these investments fail to deliver on the promise that the business case originally intended. So the answer is almost never the technology. It's the discipline around it. It's the adoption nobody owns, the integration nobody governs, and realistically, what we never talk about after we go live. So we're going to use that kind of framing for our conversation today, and that'll be the focus of what all the folks on the stage are answering. So they obviously all introduced themselves. So we have NetSuite and Caravel. We're going to jump into adoption first as a managed outcome. So who actually uses this? And then in terms of the integration, what are we focusing on from a discipline and cost risk control standpoint? How do we actually do that well? And then after go live, how do you know that it actually worked? So we'll jump into adoption first. And then our first question for our folks on stage here is, what is your definition of a successful adoption? Not go live, not training. And then what metric actually tells you after 12 months that the adoption actually happened with your customers? So feel free to jump in. We're not going to dictate who has to answer, but whoever thinks is best to answer on stage, go ahead.
I think after the 12 months adoption is they're still learning, they're still going through the process of understanding the whole implementation. They're not going back in their old habits. We see lots of customers coming from Excel. Some people here are using Excel. They're no longer using those processes. They're using the safe searches. They're using the analytics tools, the tools inside the environment, and they're still learning and growing on that process. I think that would be a good.
How do you track a successful implementation?
And what's the metric 12 months after that defines
Right.
success for you? Yeah.
And so it definitely varies by customer, and it can be time, it can be reducing month-end close, it can be all of these different things. But for me, when I think of a successful customer utilizing NetSuite, it's someone that is confidently running in the system, building out reports, growing on NetSuite, using AI, like bringing in Claude connectors and being able to build upon and being excited about it. And I know that's not a specific metric, excitement, but it's when your team is happy to be utilizing the system and also gaining efficiencies through growing through the system after 12 months.
Can I challenge the question?
Sure. Yeah. Please.
Okay. So does your vendor know what adoption looks like? A lot of times my client doesn't know what adoption looks like.
Fair.
Truthfully,
Fair
and,
point,
and that's
yeah.
part of the challenge, because in NetSuite, our typical buyer is in the mid-market and they're running disjointed systems and they want to fix things like inventory turns and DSO and days to close, but they don't know what they are because they're not on a system that can answer those questions. So oftentimes I find that our buyers are in an evaluation because a PE firm or a board member or some external factor has told them that they need technology at their next inflection point, and that evaluation isn't tied to trying to fix something that can be tracked. So I think that's an important part of what we bring to our customers is challenging them on what are the adoption metrics that you are looking for as a result of this project? So we can track any of the usage metrics and KPIs around the system, but what are you trying to do as a client is an important conversation.
Sure. It's a two-way street, I guess, is like to summarize what you're saying, right? Like we both have to be on the same page with what that metric is and then agree and align on that and move forward and actually track to that.
Yeah. And then talk about the reality of what happens if they don't know their benchmarks today.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great point. Your next question.
Yeah. All right. So continuing the theme of adoption, would someone kindly tell me a story about a client whose adoption has failed and nothing hypothetical, an actual client experience? What went wrong, if you don't mind, and how did you guys solve it?
Yeah, I think, you know, I can think of a recent example of a pretty large client. Um, you know, they strive to solve everything at once, every edge case, every integration. It needs to fit their old legacy workflows, and then it goes on, and then there's turnover at the company, and the leadership changes, and the people that started the project aren't there anymore, and now you have new people picking up the project, and next thing you know, you're 12, 18 months into the project, and you're not live, and people are frustrated. And I think that's when things go wrong. I think that's a relatively consistent story. And I really think when you go into one of these things, you have to look for those wins, get people solving a problem, get people getting the ROI on the problem that they came to solve, get people adopting it, and then build off of that success rather than just keeping to try to solve for every possible situation and every legacy use case, because you can really get yourself into trouble that way.
Right. So are you able to help the client that stalled?
Yeah, well, I think ultimately that client that stalled engaged an alliance partner, like a Caravel. I don't think it was Caravel, and I think that they've gotten themselves to a better place for sure. And I think most of the time we can get people to a better place, but it takes a thought leadership change and a mindset to want to get there, and to break maybe some of the habits or things that you were doing before.
Right. Having a champion, it
That's
seems, to take it, whether it's the person who wanted the project and was the sponsor of it, or someone that can take the baton if there's change, voluntarily or involuntarily. Anyone else wanted to answer, please?
Yeah, I have another scenario. When a customer is doing their practices or their leading practices from their legacy system and they want to do those inside NetSuite or the new ERP, that is usually
Bless you.
the hardest thing to get over, right? We've gone through the whole cycle. We found out why they want to go to NetSuite. They want to track these KPIs or this whatever's, and they don't want to adopt the leading best practices for NetSuite to get them there.
Yeah.
Right. So they still lay back on their old processes. And again, it's that conversation. Maybe it's not a conversation with sales or pre-sales or functional consultants or leadership or whatever, but they gotta that light has got to go on in their head to saying, hey, I need to do something different because it's not working. Right. So,
Yeah.
and it's definitely a hard conversation to have with some people that I'm set in my ways of doing X. And sometimes it's maybe the one example I can think of is the son's owner. He's like, Dad, we got to do it this way. We didn't buy NetSuite to do it X way.
Right.
We did it because we're going to do it in the process that they show us. And that was a hard conversation for Dad to hear. But it eventually did. The implementation took longer than it should have done. But, we did get them live and got them successful. And they saw the matrix of what they wanted to see, profitabilities and all the other, aspects that they were after.
Yeah, and behavior change is one that is up on the screen is one of the largest challenges, probably during the adoption phase. And realistically, you can accomplish adoption before you begin an integration by buy-in and getting sponsors within your departments. What's the most common workaround your clients have built on your system, and what does that say about issues that are still out there?
I think it varies by industry. Obviously, it varies by industry and what the customers need there. When our solutions come to mind for Caravel. So something that we do is by industry, we'll identify pain points within the solution and we'll actually build capabilities on top of NetSuite to create a solution on top of it to roll out to our clients. So those are things that we've identified, and if it comes up enough and enough and enough, for example, we have a construction bundle that we built on top of the projects module to extend its capabilities for construction. We saw it come up enough, and we built that solution. But taking it back to like a common, I guess, thing that is happening outside of the system. Let's take maybe some like fixed asset reporting on warranties. You're using fixed assets in NetSuite, and there's some custom fields that you could build around it, but there's not a lot of like specific like warranty tracking. Historically, people would have taken that out to Excel, done some management there, had box folders that they had all the warranties in. But now with AI, the conversation changes, right? Now we're able to build a really cool warranty dashboard within Claude via the MCP connector and take this and extend its capabilities, NetSuite being it, to do more with AI. So that's been a really cool, I guess, services change in the sense of implementation and adoption for clients is finding these gaps in the system. Every system has gaps and utilizing AI to solve it. I don't know if you.
Yeah, I mean, I think workaround can be looked at, obviously you don't want the Excel type of workarounds when you're taking a legacy practice and you're leaning on Excel or whatever, but it was funny, you know, 40 years ago when customization was a dirty word, and then NetSuite came along and it's a platform, and we tried to get people to realize that, you can extend the capabilities of the suite, you can configure, you can build platform solutions to solve business specific problems. And then AI came along, and it's never been easier to extend the capabilities of the NetSuite, whether that's using AI in Claude or something like that to build a dashboard, or using AI tools to help you quickly build platform customizations that don't actually use AI at all. Maybe they're just better workflows or better searches or better custom solutions that Claude Code or Codex or something helped you to build faster and more reliably. So I think there is a big difference between a workaround and a business specific or an industry specific solution that you are able to develop on the platform, and either using AI to help you build it or using AI to solve the problem.
Thanks.
Just to finish out that thought, I mean, Excel is the common denominator in the workaround. It's somebody is going to extract the data out of a system like NetSuite and dump it into Excel because it's a familiar interface. They're going to model it, they'll mock up their journal entries, and then they'll import it back in the system. What you have to look at in that scenario is on the audit trail, when is that happening, in what process? And then you talk to the user to understand why. You could have done this inside of the ERP. We have the user interface to accommodate that process flow. Why did you put it into Excel? Those are the questions that you have to interrogate and find, because we can then go amend the system so that it is more compliant with what the user is actually trying to do.
Brilliant.
I would also say who, right? So who when you're investigating is a really important question. So I'll kick it back to you because I know we were talking before this. Question that wasn't obviously in there for you guys to prepare for, but talk about a little bit on the customer side. Like, what are you expecting from them to be a good partner? So that way it does install, or there isn't some sort of workaround build, or there isn't a failure in the system. Would love to hear your perspective on where NetSuite's headed, because I think it was a really compelling conversation that we had about what's changing. And that excites me about where you guys are headed versus me as a leader before that adopted NetSuite and maybe my experience like 3 or 4 years ago.
Certainly. So,
Yeah.
so two-part question. We'll tie off on the first part. The who definitely matters, because you're going to have, data entry folks and analysts within the organization that want a red button to be blue and they want it to be a square and not a circle. You have to take that sort of feedback with a grain of salt as a leader making decisions about what's really important to the business. So, of course, weigh that consideration. One of the common failures that we're talking about up here is a lack of continuity of information. So you've got a CFO change or a controller change. Someone who was instrumental in the selection of the ERP is no longer with the organization. They've made these decisions to change a process and change the system, and now no one has the context for where those decisions came from and why we do things the way that we do. Similarly, on the vendor side, we've probably had turnover, and your account manager is no longer with the business, or your pre-sales person is no longer with the business. And so now you have to start a whole new evaluation over to understand why you got the technology you did and why it's set up that way. So at NetSuite, we've recognized this, and we are consolidating the buyer's journey and the customer's journey into one continuous motion. So we are going to be capturing every conversation that happens from the very first time we talk to a prospective customer all the way through to the conversations that take place during implementation. We're going to catalog and store that into the customer knowledge base. That will then exist for every customer that we have within NetSuite, so we can always reflect back on why the architecture decisions were made the way that they were, who was involved in that, and that's going to save you months of time reevaluating the tech that you already own. It also means that we can deliver more accurate statement of work when it comes time to implement that software.
Yeah, and to summarize too, something in Lean Six Sigma management that we talk about that's called motion waste, right? And waiting waste. And so you want to eliminate that as much as possible because you don't want to be spending time continuously revisiting the same thing or continuously focusing your energy on waiting around for that person to understand your business and how you can move forward.
And I can admit that that happens in the sales and pre-sales process constantly. I'm sure you've all experienced it. You have one conversation with a sales rep up front that's 30 minutes. They want to introduce you to another sales rep and you have the same conversation for an hour. They want to introduce you to a solutions consultant and you have that same conversation for an hour and you're like, can I just see the product? Like, I have a problem and I want to see if you can solve it. You've just wasted 3 weeks of my life.
Well, and it's really been it's been unlocked to some large degree by AI. You know, AI is really good at capturing information, documenting processes, storing it in a consistent way over and over again. Whereas, you know, it used to be, you know, you had people at the company doing their own business processes, and if they left, you know, that knowledge went away, or if they documented it, they documented it some way different than somebody else documented it. And it's really never been easier to document standard operating procedures and capture information in the sales cycle that can flow through to the configuration, that can flow through to the customer management system. So these problems that existed were real problems that AI has come along and is really good at some of these just natural issues that have existed in the motion before and can really help us solve them.
The problems of yesterday are no longer the problems of today.
That's right. There's new problems
To an extent.
for sure. There's new problems,
That's right,
but they're not the
that
same
usually
problems.
happens. Yeah, good point. Really quick before we jump into a final question on this topic, Nick just told me that we're going to run long for the rest of the day on all sessions for about 10 minutes for CPE credit purposes. So lunch will also begin 10 minutes later than expected. So don't rush out to lunch at the end. It's not going to be ready and prepared for you yet. So just stay put if you can. Thank you so much. To also make this a little bit more engaging, any questions from the audience that you guys would like to ask these fine folks on stage about adoption and what disciplined adoption looks like and what you're dealing with? Any burning questions? We got one over here. Do we have a mic for?
Where's that here? I got a couple things. It's like, oh, you guys need to speak still.
Okay, so we are going through a multi-system ERP system switch over. We have a legacy ERP and a database system with about 200 databases that we are combining all into one. We're moving over to Microsoft Dynamics. Our company itself is about 85 years old, so they've been on these same systems that long for 85 years.
Oof.
Yes, we have a lot of history. We have been using the same processes, and they're pretty ingrained.
I think I heard DOS yesterday from you too, correct?
Yes.
Is that right? Ooh, I got a good memory.
Green screen. Yes, that's me. How would you suggest we make sure that we have all the buy-in when we actually go live in a year?
How many years?
We've already pushed it back. We're not pushing it back
That'll be
again.
year 86.
Not doing that. No, we go live next March. Okay. There's a couple of things that I'll first endeavor on. Number one is a very, very important part of your implementation is going to be business requirements and making sure, and we've kind of talked to this already, the right people are in the room. You have your SMEs there that know the process backwards and forwards and are excited to adopt the change that is going to come from a new system, because we can't just go and put DOS into Microsoft Dynamics, any system, and you know this. But I would say having the subject matter experts as a part of the business requirements and making sure that you're diving in there in extreme detail and documenting exactly how you want these new processes to go forward. Your implementation partner should be giving you best practices. They should be pushing back on those workflows as well and saying, actually, have you thought of it in this way when your subject matter experts are coming forward with their ideas? So business requirements, having the right people in the room, big time. And then when we're going into training and testing, it's funny. Testing sometimes gets a little bit undersold in the wayside of the implementation because it's your first time in the system, hands on the keyboard without an implementation consultant. They're in the background, they're there ready for you. But that is two of the most important adoption places, because we're talking about how the system is configured, how we're going through, how we're feeling as we're putting in the new sales orders, converting them to a receipt, converting them to an invoice, and all of the approvals and things of that nature. And so making sure that the people are trained and testing all the testing use cases that they need to be. And if there's any reconfiguration that needs to happen, it needs to happen then after testing, not when you go live. So having that buy-in, I would say, across the team in those two particular parts of the implementation are really important.
Yeah, just to add, I had some great customers go live. Some is, they've been on an agent system forever, green screen, blanket screen. They made it an event. They had T-shirts. They had a party. They would have all these things. They would make. How many transactions did you put in yesterday? How many did you do? And they would make it so exciting for everyone. And even the person in the back corner that didn't want to play the game or anything like that, eventually kind of got pulled into that group think and got excited about the whole process because, hey, if we did it, we get a pizza party at the whatever it is, right? T-shirts, whatever the whole process is. Make it fun and you'll get buy-in with everyone.
Yeah, and I think just to build off that, and it was mentioned a couple times, champions, excitement, passion, right? It bleeds through the organization. If you have those, and it's really any technology change or any major change at all, whether it's adopting AI, whether it's adopting new system, whether just change management in general. If you have a couple of leaders or people that are respected in the organization who are truly excited, who are truly passionate, who can sell that passion and excitement down to the rest of the organization, to the people who may be a little bit slower at adopting it, I think it does wonders. I also think, and I'm sure Microsoft has partners or they offer some sort of managed service offering. I do think they're very important. I know at NetSuite we've got managed services. I'm sure Caravel has managed services, but that ongoing support, I don't think it should be understated. I think you want to be able to go to someone who can help you. And I think having that support system in place is really important.
Actually, to volley it over to you, we were talking earlier today about how in other implementations and projects like this, you have tied performance to the implementation, to your team members that are involved in that. Could you maybe explain a little bit more on how you did that? Because I think that also, right, tying performance and business reviews over the implementation too.
Yeah, at Human IT, I owned HR as well. It rolled up to me, and so we built out a performance management system. And one of the things that we did was we looked at behaviors, and values and principles, how people behave, and the second was like, how do you actually truly perform in your role, right? And so for back office staff, one of the things that we did was, we were going through major technology like overhaul and transformation, and so we tied roadmaps and outcomes, and then like those specific satisfaction scores and adoptions to people's performance to make sure that they had a leg in the game or a stake in the game, right? And so that went well to roll into NetSuite, but it didn't always go well for every module that we adopted afterwards. And so we had a couple failure points, and so there is a requirement on the customer side to say like, hey, I have an ownership stake in this. Where did I go wrong, right? And so I actually had to jump in from a communications standpoint to support my controller through a failed rollout, right? And so we have to talk about those failures and not just our successes of everything that's gone right on this stage too, to be honest with folks about it's okay to fail forward, right? And we have those learnings along the way, and we got to do our best to work as a partner with the folks on stage to do what's right and to get back on track.
I absolutely agree. And maybe to tie off on this point, for your example specifically, we talk about the idea of a champion. And Kelly mentioned that it's important for your implementation partner to challenge the existing processes that you're doing. Think about the dynamic in the room. There's probably only 2 people from the partner, and there might be 10 to 15 people from your side. It's going to get uncomfortable because the partner is saying, you need to change, you need to do this. But the collective is saying, we're not, we can't, we won't. And so as a champion, what you can do is help amplify that partner's voice. They're not always right, but if they continually get shut down by that group of 15, they're going to stop speaking up. And that's when you're going to have a real challenge. So you can champion them by being their support agent to help drive that change.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, let me scoot over here.
We got another question?
Yep, we got another question.
Love all this curiosity.
Good morning. I guess my question is probably a slight modification and a build off of what you just pointed out. And you probably already answered the question, but let me just kind of paint the context with as many brief words as possible. I've been in private sector 10, 15 years and then moved into government sector just 5 years ago. So I try to bring all the greatness and the speed and efficiency that I learned from private sector from my previous management into government sector.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for your service.
If I'm, when you're faced with that unpopularity, you're kind of the small squealing voice in the room trying to bring efficiency and improvement. And I have a team of 22 people ranging from ages 21 to 71.
Ooh.
And so I'm in this very peculiar position of trying to sell AI, which should sell itself, but I'm in such a predicament. How do I package it between 2 or a variety of generations in this age spectrum without losing time? Because I obviously don't want to silo it. One training for you and another training for you and another training for my baby boomers. I mean, we talked about it in the previous sections. I want to use my words very carefully. What is the fastest way to migrate into this pace and not be lost, 20 years behind, just as with any other government entity would? So I'm really asking for help from the leaders and the experts in this room. I'm in such a predicament. I want to make sure my people are employable. And with legislative changes, shortly to happen and become a reality, it's going to impact funding, employment. So the whole aspect of employability, yet not diluting commitment and loyalty and the human factor, has been such a topic which I lose sleep on. I don't know if I will make it year 6 just from the anxiety this whole industry is bringing in. So basically, I'm asking for help.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And that's a very common challenge that we're hearing from our customers. And we talk about the fact that AI won't replace you, but people who know how to use AI very well might. And that's the challenge that you're describing for the older generation that may not be as quick to adopt the tech. I can talk about how we educated our teams internally at NetSuite on AI, and you have to assume the lowest common denominator. So start with just baseline foundational understanding of generative AI, and that education has to roll out to everyone, and then build from there. To your point, you can't create training that's specific to each user's place on the journey. It's not feasible. I had another thought that has escaped me.
Can I build on what you
yeah,
said
go
while you're trying to get your thought? I would say 2 things, right? Meet them where they're at to an extent, but also at the same time, don't try to do it all yourself, right? I mean, we're at the CFO Alliance track for a reason. Something that I often do is seek perspective, right? Don't assume that you're the smartest person in the room or you've done everything, and we haven't. Right? We just haven't. And so I may go talk to Casey about something that Casey's great at because I know that that's what he's been successful. I may go to talk to Hernan earlier because he has a different angle on that and he's seen something that I haven't, right? So really try to make sure that you're always taking that to mind. you came to the session for a reason. Don't try to solve the problem yourself. Come talk to us after and get our perspective, get our information, and we'll help you out. Yeah.
I think something is that meet them where they're at. Don't try to explain to the 71 to the 21-year-old why it's important. All the training, I mean, training classes, all that stuff can be overwhelming. But if you can find easy problems that you can solve, you can get the light bulb to go off, and then you can solve more complicated problems. Let me give you some examples that have nothing to do with work, right? I wanted to explain to my family, my parents who didn't even start using a computer until they were 50, what AI was. We were at Passover dinner, and a topic came up with my second cousin who's in college, and he was getting grilled about girls, and he was clearly uncomfortable. So I just pulled open ChatGPT, and I was like, ChatGPT, I'm at Passover dinner, and my aunt is grilling me about girls. What do I do? And it was like classic Passover conundrum, and it had like little Jewish puns in there.
100% agreed with you, right?
And everybody was laughing, and it gave really funny scenarios, and that kind of got it started. Second scenario, my dad, in his mid-70s, been in the same house for 40 years, looking to downsize, had an opportunity to buy a new house, and was very overwhelmed by, what do I do? Do I hire a real estate agent? Do I go, how do I work? There's so many things. He hasn't sold a house or bought a house. He had a head injury a couple of years ago. And so I just thought of it as a good opportunity to, I did a brief little bit, 15, 20 minutes creating some discovery questions. I had a 1-hour call with him. I took the transcript of the call with the discovery questions, and it just spit out a project plan, right? And then I went over it with him, and he was like, "Oh, this is great. Could we change this thing around? Could we create a version for your mom that doesn't say this? And we did it, and the light bulb went off. This guy who AI was so foreign to him, computers were still kind of just something that has always been on the sidelines. He got it, and it helped him. So I think if you can identify things that can really help your people, to get that light bulb to go off, then, and they'll see that this isn't something that you need to be an engineer for. This isn't something that you need to have an advanced degree in mathematics to use. It does work with natural language, and you can explain a problem, and it can help you solve the problem.
And that is that.
Just on we spend decades trying to expand special nation, but we're at a point where we're trying to swim back like an Aquarian spa, right? We have cools. What is your take on bringing the generalists back in the state? Because they're finding it hard to maintain specials in this right now.
I think it's a mix. You can have a generalist that is, and we often do in implementations, right? You have someone that knows a lot about a lot over the entire business, but I think still having subject matter experts, if you have a big enough team to own the minute details in each of those items, is important, because you still need that person that is the true subject matter expert, but a generalist is also very, very helpful in an implementation.
I think you should also think about where that is related to the third theme that we're going to talk about later, right? When you think about bringing the generalists back, when we get to the actual discipline piece of that and the realization, that's where the generalist becomes really valuable, because they are going to have to manage 70 to 100 agents at some point, right? Do they need to know how to do all of those 20 to 50 things that those agents are doing? And so that's where the value is for generalists, in my opinion, is after adoption, not before. Yeah.
And we're actually, for my business, we're going the other direction, because the challenge with a specialist is they're expensive and their capacity is usually not at 100%. And so you have people sitting on the bench. What AI has allowed us to do is increase the utilization of a specialist. So we can have fewer specialists operating at a higher capacity, because AI has helped enable a more consistent output. So we're moving away from general into specialist.
When I go out to clients, and they aren't perhaps as sophisticated in accounting or finance as myself or other team members, we use the term financial empathy. And I think that it applies to AI. I think that talking about AI and embracing it and saying technology, empathy, developing some mantra around it is going to add to the rest of the buy-in.
And adding on that, I would say part of the empathy is showing your work, right? I know I said before, don't try to do it yourself, but when you do try to do it yourself and you do it really well, make sure that you show them, like, bring them along with you, right? Show them what good looks like. Make sure that they understand that if they can see it and they can try to do it themselves, that is the fastest way to learning. And it can be as simple as, I do this for another group that I'm a part of, teach AI courses, like basic level stuff, like once a month, right? One of the first things that we actually did was we actually went in and we showed them how to prompt properly, right? How to set up like Claude Cowork, how you could actually take that Claude Cowork approach from a mindset shift standpoint and optimize your communications and your professional and your personal life. How do you think about looking at your calendar differently, the summaries of your email that are trash in Gmail, right? How do you get more insights, deeper insights, faster to make better decisions from those types of things? And the rest is up to them to decide from a creativity standpoint how they're going to build on that. It's not necessarily always about showing them that thing. It's about showing them how to do the basic concept and then let them build on the basic concepts to do other things.
Increasing adoption. He start increasing use.
Correct. Yeah. 100%.
And the last point I'll make on adoption for AI, I think part of the reason that it feels so daunting as a leader who is responsible for rolling out AI is because every hour there is something new.
Yeah.
You cannot go onto LinkedIn without a new tool, a new widget, a new project, a new MCP project, feature, whatever. And so we dealt with this where we'd build the training materials and then something new would come out and it would totally change the entire program. And we'd have to start over. Forget it. Ignore it all.
It's noise.
It's just noise.
And ignore the show-offs.
Yeah.
100%.
Just, like Aaron was saying, focus on the fundamentals of how do I structure a prompt? How do I even log into the freaking thing? How do I just get a conversation started? That's all you need to do. The rest will snowball from there. Ignore the new stuff, the shiny thing. As the guy that sells technology, you should probably strike that from her.
And just one thing to add, they probably all know how to do a Google search.
Yeah.
Take that Google search and put it in a chat and start there.
Yep.
Maybe somebody's into barbecuing or somebody's into some, whatever it is. Start with that. It's not an individual training. It's what they're interested in. And that will start the process. And they're like, oh, I can use this for work. Or I can work, my wife asked me a question. I don't know what the answer is. There you go. Instead of Googling it and throw it in the chat.
And then they can have a better Passover conversation, right?
That's a great example.
All right, we're gonna move on from adoption unless anybody else has anything to add. I'm good. Okay. All right, and we kind of touched on this a little bit already. So the second failure here is quieter and more expensive, right? It's not that nobody uses it; it's that it connects to 10 other things that nobody owns the seams for. A connector built for one version that breaks on an upgrade or a new type of technology that comes out that may be required to do their best work. A year one data flow that throws errors that no one can trace by year three. I think, you were talking about this earlier about the person leaving and continuity. Integration discipline is not whether you can connect systems. Everyone can do that, right? I think we're all aware of that at this point in this day and age. It's who owns the seam when something changes, and it's really about ownership and change management. So when we talk about that, we really want to understand that ownership, and that's the whole theme of this next set of questions. What does a broken integration cost your close cycle, your reporting, and your continuity? So Casey, you have the first question this time, and I'll let you go ahead and ask.
And I'm gonna preface this with, I'm looking for a dollar amount, and I'd ask for a dollar amount from each of you. And I'm not going to end this question until I get one. So what's the most expensive integration failure you have seen at a client? What caused it and what would have prevented it?
I have one that I can reference pretty quickly. I had a client, and integrations are going to cost different. The way that we price integrations is based on the number of endpoints, so the information that we're bringing to and from both of the systems. And so that has an influence, right? You can have a custom integration build that's 15K. You can have a custom integration build that's 60K, and it varies. This one was around 50K, that the one that I'm talking about, and that we had quoted. And so what had happened was that we were told we would be integrating to a proprietary software. And yes, sounds great. We can definitely do that. No issue. As long as it has an open API, we've got an open API. We're good to go. But what we weren't aware of is that that proprietary system was a moving target. It was not completed. And so we go into the implementation and we document the business requirements, and they say, yeah, we think it's going to flow these specific items here, here, and here, and on this cadence. And we say, great. And we're going into the configuration phase and we say, okay, is it ready to start building the integration and testing to it? And they're like, oh, no, no, no. We haven't finished it yet, and we think we're going to change these 3 or 4 different integration points. And then at that point, you're trying to hit a moving target, and it snowballs. It takes longer to integrate to. You have a timeline and scope creep because of hours on the timeline. You have scope creep because of the change and change and change again to a proprietary system on the integration side. And so it was about 50K, probably all in, that came out of it to where it went over. But the primary issue is that we were trying to hit a moving target, and we didn't know that it would be moving when we went into the project.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Great answer. All three. Appreciate it.
Well, and you could talk about the integration failure that cost tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars in the time that you're spending to try to build the integration, but there's also the opportunity cost of using the other platform that you're paying for that you're not using properly because you're still futzing around with the integration. And I think that one of the biggest problems I've seen is and I referred to this earlier, you're trying to solve for 100% of the use cases and not the 60 or 70% of the majority of use cases. And you get successful there, you get champions, you get ROI, you get adoption, and then you go and in a phase 2 solve for the next 10% or the next 5%. And now we have MCP integrations. It's a whole new type of integration too. So there's more complexity in the whole integration stack than there was before. But I do think you have the cost that you're putting into the integration, and you have the opportunity cost of not using the tool that you've already purchased, that you're integrating to.
I appreciate the technical question, but I want to challenge that a little bit, right? I think in terms of like the work that you do on the customer success side, I'm curious to hear from you in terms of, was that a problem statement issue in the first place? And what I mean by that is, did they properly define the problem, regardless of whether we have new MCP connectors or, prior place, and Kelly would love to hear from you on this too, right? If we are consistently seeing a moving target, to me, in my opinion and from my perspective, historically, I've seen that as just a really poorly designed problem, which leads to the moving target. And that's actually the root cause is actually the problem statement, not necessarily the fact that like the target is moving or there's, they're putzing around with, something that we want to focus on an opportunity cost to move them forward, right? So I'm curious to hear your perspective based on that and just kind of reframe it a bit from a customer success standpoint, and maybe also like to send it back down the line.
Yes,
To hear from you on that.
the scenario that I can think of is prior to COVID, it was a volume issue, right? So they're saying they're coming in with a certain amount of transactions. It should be this cost, let's say 10, I think it's 10 to 15K. COVID hits, everybody's buying online, their volume triples. It now kills the pipeline. They got too much stuff coming in. Now we have to reinvent the wheel because their volume has never been X, but now it's that, times, and it ended up being, 50K or something like that. Some things you can plan. We had COVID, no one planned about, things like that happen in those scenarios. So be open, be flexible to change is also important when things happen, right? Somebody leaves, big disaster, COVID happens. Make sure you're flexible enough and make those opportunities and change them.
So what I'm hearing is like, be a good partner when that happens. Be flexible. Help go back to the drawing board and help redefine the problem statement. And
They'll be fixed.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially when especially after the sale, you're in the actual process of implementing. Okay, what can we do? Well, let's figure it out. Let's work together as a team to figure out what the issue is. Maybe we just get another, volume license, or we whatever that is.
I'm gonna get a little tactical for a second.
Please do.
The two words that scare me the most in this conversation: open API.
Mm.
Because we'll throw that around in a pre-sales process, we'll throw that around in a scoping process, and everyone just assumes, well, it's open. We can interface. And to Kelly's point, yes, there's a moving target, but those open APIs are not always open. So I ran into a situation where everyone said APIs are open, we'll facilitate the integration. Well, the API was open if you were in that software's partner network. They were not accepting new partners into that network. So all of a sudden, we had an integration thought out that was no longer available to us. So what you want to push your vendor for in that conversation is, what is the schema? I want to see the data schema for the source system and for the target system in the statement of work. I don't want to see platitudes like open API, because then we would have surfaced that issue in the scoping conversation and not in the delivery conversation.
Yeah, great point. Kelly, anything to add?
Yeah, I would say in the sense of when you're evaluating integrations, open API, yes. Is it truly open? And then to your point too, sometimes it's an open API with a caveat of you've got to pay a lot of money to open up that API, lots of money. And so always having that, I would say like best practice if we're building a custom integration is always have both vendors on the line, right? Get that. If it's a proprietary system, that's easy. It's you're the vendor. But if it's not, get both of those vendors on the line, discuss the frameworks of how we're going to integrate, and have a system that is already implemented on the other side that we're integrating to. Yeah. Done. Finished. Tested. Complete. Live.
Joe, anything to add?
Well, not to always bring everything back to AI, but I do think AI can be a really good tool in some of these situations as well, right? It used to be, the customer thinks one thing, the vendor wants to do another thing, and they can bicker about it. But now you have a tool that has the knowledge of many, many years of these types of situations that you can refer to, and you could put the data model from both systems into the tool, and you can ask it, hey, I want to get your guidance on what you think a best practice were, and you can use it almost as an objective arbiter in some of these situations as well. So I do think, again, with AI, yes, there are new problems, but some of these older problems are simpler to solve because you have this technology.
I think it's an and thing. I agree with you, right? I think it's the combination of what you and Kelly both said. I think you have to do that pre-work, to your point, like use AI to do the pre-work with like bringing in those models or bringing in your questions about what the vendors are telling you on both sides. Even if the model piece tells you the right direction, you still need to get on the phone and have the conversation and get everybody on the same page to get that ownership cleared and squared away in terms of like, what are we all going to be responsible for now that we agree on what the problem statement is. So I'm going to take it back to the problem statement, right? That's why I touch on that, because I think it's so important to make sure we're all clear on exactly what the problem is, especially if there's two vendors involved in the process, right? Cool. The next question that I have for this group is, if I asked the client to list every integration running today, could they, and would the list be accurate? And I'm curious to hear specific examples of like maybe where that has happened that you guys have seen.
Depends on the size of the client. Smaller client, a couple integrations, pre-built, easy. Yeah, I've got 3 banks connected and I've got Expensify connected to NetSuite. Cool. Awesome. But the larger that you go, we've seen clients with many custom-built integrations. And of course, they're not going to be able to list them off the top of their head. They'll be able to list the main ones that are affecting revenue and things of that nature. But one thing that's really important in these implementations that you're going through is that you must require your vendor in the implementation consulting side to have a full integration document guide that has the workflows, the exact endpoints, all documented, all in your business requirements document, and then you have that integration guide. It's very important. If you don't have that, right? I have clients that didn't have that before, where they've come over and were taking over an implementation, and we said, oh, where's your integration document guide? And they said, we don't have one. And we said, oh no, we need to go. And it's not a lot of money, but it's money in hours and time to go and ask, how is this connecting? Go and review everything of how it's connecting into your systems.
I would say, and also in some cases, I think we heard from the audience earlier, right? use another area where AI could maybe be helpful. Maybe they don't know how to even do that or what that document is, right? We have a lot of different audience members in the room right now that are different stages of that journey, right? So Joe, I would actually love to hear from you. Like we were talking about that earlier, and you were talking about examples that might be helpful from a best practices standpoint to talk through.
Yeah, I think when you're a company who's had the same processes for 80 years, I imagine that there's a lot of gaps in some of that integration knowledge. I think hopefully when you go through an implementation to something like NetSuite and using a new integration platform, you're using that as an opportunity to document all your integrations. And going forward, you should have a pretty good finger on the pulse of your integrations, whether that's in an integration platform like the NetSuite integration platform or Dell Boomi, or even in NetSuite. Um, but yeah, to bring it to the AI is really great at helping you walk through the process of documenting that. Simply saying, look, here's the systems that we've used. We've been in business 80 years. We're about to go through a major change management. We're buying Microsoft Dynamics. Help me document my integrations? Where do I need to go? Where do I need to look? How do I, and it's going to, tell me everything that you need to know to help me document these integrations. And it's going to do a really good job at that. And it will help you. And maybe you don't get 100% there, but you'll get pretty close. And then your vendor, hopefully can help you get over the hump with that.
I mean, I think the mere fact that we're having this conversation is a step in the right direction, because a lot of times what I see when finance is leading the evaluation, they care about the outcomes for the business. Like, I need to do reconciliations, I need to close the books, I need to make payroll. And they know that that requires data from multiple systems, but how that plumbing gets facilitated behind the scenes often doesn't really matter to them as long as it's done in a secure, compliant way. So they're not necessarily asking the question of, where are those integrations documented? Who owns them? How often do they get updated? And maybe the implementation partner just assumes that the customer knows they've bought a tech platform that requires that maintenance. And so it just kind of gets left in no man's land where nobody owns it because nobody thought to ask about it. So the fact that we're having this conversation at all, I think, is huge.
Yeah, agreed.
Great. Do you want to
Go.
I was going to, do you want to move this into a realization?
Oh yeah, we can. We want to get one audience question.
Yeah, I was going to say,
We have 10 minutes.
I was going to say in the transition, yeah, if there's any questions
Any questions
from
on
the audience?
integration? We got one in the back.
My question's around testing. You guys mentioned that that's one of the key pieces to the process. How do you ensure that as your team goes through um, that testing process, one of the things I've seen in my experience in implementations is there isn't enough of it. So are you seeing AI kind of melding or bridging that gap at all where they can help with the testing so that you actually get some decent outcomes and find some of the issues that might come from actual legitimate good, thorough testing? Because that's where we find the gaps, and we have to come back to you and say, hey, you guys promised this bill of goods and it sucks. Like, and then we get mad, and then now we go back and forth because it's not tested correctly. So have you found any gaps for that test?
To answer, first off with testing, when we're thinking of the timeline of testing, it depends on how complex your integration is, on the number of test cycles that we want to have in the implementation. Simple rollout of NetSuite, for example, 4-month timeline, we have a single test cycle with 3 to 4 weeks. One with a custom integration or two test cycles. More integrations, we'll have 3 test cycles sometimes, even more. And with that testing, when it comes to AI help, if your vendor is not creating catered test cycles, use cases. So at Caravel, what we'll do is we'll implement to the business requirements and the configuration. And then for the testing cycles, we have use cases that are specifically meant to trip required fields, workflows, all of those things that are catered to your environment. If you have vendors that aren't creating those test cases for you, you could, in theory, use AI to create those test use cases for you and cater them to your business requirements document so you can make sure that your team is going through and testing the system appropriately. But when it comes to actually testing the system through those use cases, I wouldn't encourage AI in the sense of like having AI do those test cases for you, because the whole purpose is to have human hands on that computer keyboard entering in transactions to make sure that the adoption is going to happen when we go live. Um,
So just to clarify, so it's a new system for everybody in that case, and so they don't know or maybe don't know the exact thing to test. So what you're saying is that the vendor should be able to provide, here's my old SOPs, here's how I used to do it. Now here's the new process that I should be testing. That's what you're saying.
1,000%. The vendor that's doing the implementation with you should provide catered test cases that your team can go in and test appropriately on your system. If they don't, if you have a business requirements document to how the system was configured, I would put that into Chat or Claude, say, hey, create test use cases based off of this configuration of my system and go forward with that. But technically, your implementers should be doing that.
Thank
And
you.
that's how you can benchmark too, right? To their point. That's what I like to say. That's the pre-work, right? Go back to the vendor, still have the conversation from a relationship management standpoint. Like get those questions ready and go see if they're prepared to support you through that, like Kelly's saying.
And one thing to add to Kelly was, you're throwing that piece of document into the AI. Prompt the AI to ask you questions about that document so it's more tweaked to your environment and what you're trying to do. Because it's just going to take it and give you a generic. You want to make sure, well, and I have these 4 fields that are custom that you might not know of, or something like that. Or have it come back and ask me questions to get deeper into the scenario. What's great about AI is you can actually have the system, you have a conversation to checkbox some of those things down the road for you to get it more, I got 10 10 cases. Well, it would be great if I get 20. Well, the more you talk that conversation, the more you're going to get more test cases out of it.
Nick, any final comments before we run to, or Joe?
Yeah, I mean,
We are very close to a time where there will be agentic testing before you get to human user QA testing. That is a project that we are working on at NetSuite, and where we will have the test scenarios defined, and then we can deploy agents, 1,000 times over to run through test loops before it gets to a human. So we catch 80 to 90% of those issues that you would find in the field. So to Kelly's point, not necessarily a reality at scale today, but within the next 12 months, you're going to see that become a standard in software.
And I have seen that in other softwares outside of NetSuite that are not on this stage where those things exist already. There's already agentic testing that exists, not necessarily in accounting or ERP software, but in software in general.
And it's pretty fascinating because when we do that testing, we create a simulated persona.
Yeah.
So each agent, if you will, has its own identity, its own preferences, the way that it works through the system. So it's very much simulating how a human might process a transaction. It's not just rinsing and repeating the same process flow every time.
Yeah, thank you. Real quick, before we move on and run to the next slide, there are examples in this, and you guys will get this afterwards. So we've given you some things to think about in terms of like what types of discipline-based reasons you should be thinking about. So we'll go to realization after go live now. This is more about like the ROI and the value tied to that. So we're going to move quickly. This is post go live discipline, not pre-sale. This round should feel like a real interrogation. Let the games begin.
Is that what the fire alarm was about?
That's right. That's right. So my first question for you is, after go live, how do you track whether the business case outcomes materialize? I'm going to go back to that metric question again that you didn't like earlier. What metric, what cadence, and by whom?
Yeah, I mean, I think, do we know the metrics that the client had defined as successful for the project? If we assume yes, then that becomes the North Star. If your goal was to take the close cycle from 20 days to 10, are we at that number? I think we also have to look at daily active users and monthly active users. So with any vendor, you're going to contract for likely some number of seats for the business, 50, 100, 500. If only 10 people are logging in every day, you have a problem. And then we have to look at the audit trail to figure out what those other 40 people are not doing in that project. I think the other thing I mentioned earlier is, what if you don't know the benchmark?
Mhm.
We just know that we need new technology. We're using green screen. Obviously, that's not going to scale and take us into the future, but I don't know my inventory turns. I don't know my DSO. I don't know my days to close. Pick a number, right? Work with your vendor, work with your peers in this room to say, what should the benchmark be for my industry? Draw that line in the sand and then
Ask AI.
measure.
Yeah.
Ask AI, sure, but these are smart people.
That's also what we were talking about last night. about leveraging the relationship between CFO Alliance.
The buyer's journey and the customer journey being combined. They're not different. They should be the same. Yeah.
It shouldn't be, right? It's leveraging, if you're now capturing that by industry and we're capturing it, it's merging the two insights and the intelligence together and sharing.
Because from the vendor perspective, I can give you the tools to measure whether or not the users are using it or measure if you're hitting the targets that you want to hit. But, deciding what your targets are is kind of your responsibility at the end of the day as
Sure.
the business operator.
Yeah, I can give you a real world example for a customer to manufacturer doing 10 or 20 different assembly builds, whatever it happened to be, not knowing they're making money on the item or not, getting in the NetSuite, putting all the information in the NetSuite, the cost, the technicians, payroll, all that stuff into the system. Now they only do 10 of those 12 because the other two weren't making money for them. They're telling them that they're actually buying that product instead of making that product and selling it to the customer. That right there tells them what they never had before, right? They didn't have the ability to say, we need to stop making these two things because we're not making money. Now they can.
Insight.
And then resources wise, at NetSuite and in Caravel, we both are in constant communication with all of our clients, I would say. There's a couple of team members that I can think of off of hand that I could ask them the status on any customer at Caravel that we've ever implemented, and they can tell me within 10 minutes of this is what they're doing. This is how the implementation's going. This is how they're performing and how they're maybe adding on new capabilities in the NetSuite 6 months, 12 months in. There are those people at many people at both of our organizations, but something that's really cool that NetSuite does is they have a value management team that they can bring on during the pre-sale cycle. And there's a lot of metrics that they're capturing in that document where there's KPIs that they're capturing, things of that nature. And that document can then be kept at that point till 12 months after the implementation. Go back in and put in the new numbers there and actually track that. So there are a lot of materials that we have as vendors to help provide that information going forward.
Yeah, I think, to Nick and your point, sometimes you can't beat a conversation, right? NetSuite does have industry benchmarks. We've got 45,000 customers, over 600 public companies. We understand what the benchmarks are, and you can have a conversation with your customer or how is it going? I mean, you can look at the database and you can look at active logins and you can look at users and you can look at records, but sometimes just having a conversation with that customer and seeing are you getting the ROI on the problems that you wanted to solve? Are you accomplishing that? And here's what we see across the industry that can be really beneficial. And then of course, the AI is good at, you say, look, here's my industry. What are other companies in my industry? What is the gross margin supposed to be by product or by product line or on this type of service? And what can I, and then you get on NetSuite and you realize maybe you're not hitting it. And you say, well, what can I do to get closer? And maybe it's stop selling this product, or maybe it's, your tariff, is too high and you could source the raw materials from some other place. But there are things that you can do, at a pretty efficient way with AI that you weren't able to do before.
Thanks, Joe. Well, we're gonna get one final question from Casey because we only have a couple minutes left.
Yeah.
You want to close us out with your final question? and
Sure.
thoughts?
At what point do you tell the client the investment is not working? And what do you
Don't do that.
say that out
Don't
loud.
do that. You just gave him the easy out.
I I don't know that we would necessarily do that. I think we would try.
That's
we
a
would-
good pivot. That was
we-
a really good.
Yeah,
pivot. Yeah.
I
You-
do think we would maybe suggest a different partner,
Yeah,
right? And say, look, we haven't gotten anywhere with you, but this partner that we know has a great construction product solution that we know have worked with customers like you, and we've got this great ecosystem, and we might suggest people in the ecosystem for them to leverage. I think we know that you can be successful, right? So I think if the investment isn't working, there's probably a reason, and that reason is probably solvable, and we're probably going to try to help get you over that hump, whether it's us doing it or one of the partners in our ecosystem.
Any other quick final thoughts before we close out?
I have a quick story. Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
So I had a customer where we had talked with them about bringing in data into NetSuite, and they were adamant that they wanted to bring 15 years of GP historical GL detail into NetSuite. Adamant. We couldn't talk them out of it. We told them it's going to cost this much, it's going to take this long, but we didn't. We trusted them on their word that their data was clean coming out of GP. It wasn't. And at that point, right, we find this out in business requirements. So we've got a long way to go down the implementation. We're at the beginning. And really it's having that hard conversation. You should have those hard conversations in the implementation. You shouldn't just keep going and say, yeah, we're going to figure out how to get that 15 years of bad data into NetSuite because we had it in the SOW. No, this is where a change order comes in, and it can be a good change order. Change order isn't always a bad thing. But what ended up happening is we decided that let's not take this bad data into NetSuite. Let's park it in a data warehouse and then keep going forward, not lose too much steam in the sense of timeline on the implementation. So it's having the hard conversations when you see the problem. Don't avoid the problem. See it, identify it, and have the conversation then.
You good? Perfect. Perfect. So just to close this out real quick, so something that I use when I'm actually focused on this, it's a 3-step process. Listen and absorb the answers. I think we talked about that a lot today, like shared listening. Note and mark the gaps in your tech stack and strategy. We talked about different ways that you can do that. And then ask questions to the vendors and your table. Obviously, you don't have time to do that now, but you guys have met each other hopefully earlier in the session or in other sessions. So utilize each other as resources and make sure that you're working together to solve these problems. A couple of things we're leaving you with real quick: governance and value realization checklist. It's on your desk or on the table, excuse me. And then we have like the 2 pages for that. And then we have a little like technology assessment form that you can use, kind of a simple form to think about what types of questions would be best to ask in the process. So let's give a quick round of applause to our vendors and the folks on stage today. Nick. Sure. Nice. Nick.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, use that on. All right. Thank you everybody for this, but thank you again. Everybody here is available. First of all, so if you have additional questions, do not hesitate to reach out to them. They're going to be here today and tonight with us at our offsite. And so as you digest all of this, do not hesitate to reach out to them too. There's their contact information as well. And like we said, we're going to give you access to all these materials because I know we had to rush through this. And I appreciate your patience too as we made up that extra time. Go enjoy lunch. Meet us back here for the next session after lunch. And once again, thank you, all of you, for your candor. All right. Thanks.